you gonna vote for in the primary?
I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. Him as a human being, when I was hanging out with him, and
Yeah.
I believe in him. I like him a lot. What Bernie stands for is a guy who, well, look, you could dig up dirt on every single human being that's ever existed if you catch them in their worst moment, and you magnify those moments, and you cut out everything else, and you only display those worst moments. That said, you can't find very many with Bernie. He's been insanely consistent his entire life. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life. And that, in and of itself, is a very powerful structure to operate from.
Good evening. Welcome to Noticias Anoche Hoy. I'm Quatley. Coming up on the program, we'll be looking at Bernie Sanders' strong surge nationally and the rest of the Democratic nominees for the presidency. Nationwide, we see people turning now an eye to Bernie Sanders, saying, yes, we can. Biden is currently freaking out, rightfully so, as he is down in New Hampshire.
Wait, you're getting nervous, man.
As Bernard Sanders continues his surge there, plus 14 points in the last month. We'll also be looking at the government's lowering standards of some immigration detention facilities recently. And locally, we'll be discussing the work of a group of local activists who are calling on lawmakers to permit the sale of legal pot in public spaces around the area to bolster minority participation in the city's overwhelmingly white marijuana business. All this and more. So, we're talking about Bernie Sanders surging nationally. He nearly doubled his support in New Hampshire and is the favored Democrat in a nationwide poll. Bernie Sanders is up 52%, in contrast to Trump's weak 43%, up 3 points nationally among non-white people who were polled. So he has been polling strongly with Latinos in California, Nevada, basically nationwide, in Texas as well. And now he's starting to surge as well in South Carolina. There's a lot of good people down there working. Actually, there was a South Carolina Democrat who had endorsed Biden, now retracted that, and is endorsing Bernie Sanders. So that's Dally Myers from South Carolina, black woman elected to Richland County Council in 2016. And so this is very good. We're seeing a lot of good work from canvassers in South Carolina. Keep up the great work. We're seeing a strong surge in New Hampshire as well, as the senator from Vermont is up almost 14 points in the last month. Bernard Sanders continues his surge. We predict here that he will take Iowa, New Hampshire, and his surge in South Carolina will get him up over the Biden firewall. But it's very hopeful that Bernard Sanders' support keeps up in South Carolina and that we do come out with a win there in the first 3 states and ultimately get the first prize after Super Tuesday. Talking about ICE up ahead, we're going to also focus on Elizabeth Warren's history with ICE. Last year she was calling for ICE to be outlawed, disbanded. Since then, it's a position that's evolved for her. It seems like now she wants to reform ICE to focus more on drugs. So that's opens up another question to what sort of drugs. What's her stance on enforcing marijuana's national, federal laws, and states' rights over that issue. If she's going to be pushing ICE, it leads you to question her commitment to other issues, if that's an issue that she can evolve on in such a short amount of time. Whereas we see Bernard Sanders always steadfast and committed. We see that Elizabeth Warren has been flimsy on many issues and are calling for her to be accountable to her words, and we're focusing on the policies. ICE has been detrimental to so many families, so many just children separated from their families, and now we see this new story where they're actually going to lower the standards. So it said it updated its standards to streamline its focus on essential requirements. Very creepy way of saying we're gonna do our bare minimum because we don't give a shit about these people. They brought in the reasons why a detainee can be placed in solitary confinement. You removed language preventing officers from using hog tying, fetal restraints, and tight restraints. Also extinguished requirements for new facilities to have outdoor recreation areas, which is pretty messed up. Who knows, these people are even getting sunlight every day. So yeah, it's pretty heartless. They applied to as many as 140 facilities across the United States, as many as 18 in Texas alone. So ICE has taken the position that less safeguards are a testimony to partnering with local law enforcement's ability to successfully manage their own populations. But several of these facilities, including lockups in East and West Texas, have repeatedly violated detainees' civil and constitutional rights. So under these new weaker standards, chances that local jails and prisons will have an easier time passing inspections and keeping their lucrative contracts with ICE in place. The way the new national detention standards are structured, it removes any incentive to really provide the minimal care and oversight necessary for detainees. So this is going to make it easier for local jails and prisons to participate and get contracts. It's about the money, of course, with most things. So we don't hear much about the standards. It's rare to get a look inside, and it's also, even in front of Congress, people would go visit, very closely monitored. It just got more inhumane. And, we take this seriously as a threat to our communities. We already have a prison overpopulation problem, and now we're treating people that are coming here seeking asylum, seeking a better way of life, like criminals. Bernard Sanders is the only one who's committed to putting a moratorium on concentration of immigrants. He's the only one that's committed to changing the laws so that it's not a federal offense to cross the border, but rather it becomes a misdemeanor, and then you face a fine. He's open to having avenues for immigration. We need immigration in our communities. It's good for the country. New ideas, new labor, more humanity is always a good thing, in my opinion, humbly. As an immigrant, I am biased, I must say. But Bernard Sanders makes me feel like he takes the issue seriously. He's always been committed to the dismantling of ICE. And I do not see the same commitment from one Warren Elizabeth Biden. Of course, we know that he didn't even listen to a recent activist that was one of his rallies. He was there to see what his stance was on immigration. His name was Carlos Rojas. He previously led a left-wing group called Movimiento Cosecha that advocates for undocumented immigrants. There's a video out there where he won't even listen to these concerns of immigration, border, and Obama's policies that help exacerbate those issues and problems in the Latin community. We have been rising steadily in our numbers, and our influence in the Democratic Party grows. We're giving Bernard Sanders a fighting chance. Things of concern locally. The offices of J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Lori Lightfoot issued statements that didn't directly address local organizers. Calls for peddlers' licenses to be allowed for the sale of marijuana. Local organizers are arguing that peddlers' licenses would increase the involvement of minorities in the white-ruled cannabis industries. So let's talk about that. They issued statements that weren't very direct. Pritzker spokespeople noted that legal cannabis is currently sold by licensed dispensaries to ensure that products are regulated and safe. Quote. They also said that new dispensary, craft grow, infuser, transportation licenses would be issued in the coming months. So-called social equity candidates who have cannabis offenses on their records or live in areas ravaged by the drug war will get a leg up in the application process. And Pat Mullane said the mayor's commitment to ensuring all Chicagoans, especially those from disadvantaged communities, have the ability to benefit from jobs and economic opportunity created by the newly legalized cannabis industry. So very vague statements there. Of course, it doesn't really jive very well with the state's strict regulations regarding the sale of marijuana. You need to have security staff present. You need to scan everyone's IDs. So it's very tightly monitored by the state. So offering people a peddler's license to just go out into the street sounds very complicated in this state-regulated system. So, of course, vague answers. We'll see what happens. But very good work being done right now by these community activists. We'll say keep it up, and we have a feeling here on the program that this is the right tree to be barking on up for.
Yesterday you said you accepted Bernie's apology and now you're attacking him. Why are you doing that? Why wasn't his apology enough, Mr. Vice President?
Right this way,
Why,
sir.
why attack Sanders? Why, you're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. He apologized for saying that I was corrupt. He didn't say anything about whether or not I was telling the truth about Social Security.
Thank you, guys.
So Biden is freaking out, man. He's just got no composure, and he stands no chance against Trump. Trump is going to hit him on everything, on his son, and Biden is just going to scream at him. He's just going to get in face. What is he going to say? Hey, man. You know, it makes no sense. Bernard Sanders is the strongest candidate against Trump, and America is waking up to that, as the new polls reveal. Very, very strong numbers for Bernard Sanders. Let us not get a false confidence. Keep up the pressure. We need a total embarrassment of the Democratic Party to make sure it is a complete reform. We need AOC as president in 2028, and we need to pave the way for that with a Bernard Sanders presidency to set up the pillars so that we can build the house. We need to be serious about a Green New Deal, about the threat of climate change. It is here. Chicago is already dealing with problems, and we're going to talk more about that in a future episode. So we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching Noticias Anoche Hoy. Say your prayers, and as always, we love you, Governor Pritzker. You're the best. This has been a Pritzker Foundation funded presentation. Thank you, Governor Pritzker. We love you.